The symbolism of green, and the green lion consumes the sun. One can be green with envy, green with nausea, and dark green is used in the symbolism for the forest and wood. But the green used in mysticism is a fresh, bright, light green, the colour of a Granny Smith apple, and a colour often seen in spring as new leaves and new growth appears. It is thus a very positive symbol in mystic thought, and even associated with love in some systems, as the planet Venus's corresponding colour is green, although the Chinese system has green paired with Jupiter. The alchemical metal associated with Venus was copper, which turns a beautiful shade of green on weathering, adding to the symbolism. Sea green, adapted from a poem by Heinrich Heine. Those sea green eyes gaze on me with their love, and I am lost in dreams and cannot speak or move. Those sea green eyes stay with me when we part. An ocean of sea green thoughts floods into my heart. Green and the Four Seasons. In those religions that recognize reincarnation, green represents the birth into a new cycle of an existing immortal soul in spring. Thus, if we use our diagram of the spiritual path, the immortal soul has weathered the winter, the north of death, and is coming out of the darkness into dawn and spring to be born as a baby. From A Lute of Jade, being selections from the classical poets of China, the Wisdom of the East series, edited and translated by L. Cranmer Bing and Dr. S. Kapadia, 1918. The Grass. How beautiful and fresh the grass returns. When golden days decline, the meadow burns. Yet autumn suns no hidden root have slain. The spring winds blow, and there is grass again. In other words, green is the colour of spring, and in the cycle of life equates to our youth. Green thus carries with it all the positive associations of youth: freshness, fertility, innocence, health, and growth. However, the shade of green is important, as it can be used to mean untutored and naive, the poisonous bitterness of unripe fruits. Shakespeare used this meaning of green when Ulysses addresses Ajax's age as green in Troilus and Cressida to Nestor, and Cleopatra recalled the naive judgments of her youth by recalling them as her salad days when she was green in judgment in Antony and Cleopatra. Desert suns and refreshing rain. But what of those on the spiritual path? They go through figurative winter and darkness whilst alive, and undergo considerable trials and tribulations in order to emerge purified and chastened around about symbolic dawn. sea pink and dawn video. Symbolically, they may have to survive the desert, but when rain, that is, spirit input and grace, finally falls upon them, they too blossom, and their green is of a spirit renewed. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 20, The Rainy Season. For many months in a row, the sun with its rays drank the wealth of the earth, and now the time has arrived for its release. Massive clouds full of lightning and agitated by the fierce winds release their grace, just as persons of mercy give their life in this world. The earth that dried up because of the heat is sprinkled by the divine water and is replenished. After first having been insignificant streams, the streams that are dried up become rivers. Emerald green from the newly grown grass, the earth manifests herself like a person who has become rich. The creatures of the land and water, all reborn from the water they honoured. Hermes and Thoth. So what we have seen so far is that a person who is not on the spiritual path is reincarnated, and green then symbolises his or her youth. The person on the spiritual path, however, is aiming not to get reincarnated, and by completing the path they become a sort of god. And just such a god was the Egyptian god Thoth, or Hermes, and he was shown with a green face. Shurei, the great initiates, Hermes, Thoth. Thoth was considered one of the more important deities of the Egyptian pantheon. In art, he was often depicted as a man with the head of an ibis. Thoth is often shown holding a vase, a wand or rod, in one hand, and an ankh in the other hand. Hermes Thoth was the first initiator of Egypt into the sacred doctrine, the mysteries. The Greeks, disciples of the Egyptians, called him Hermes Trismegistus, or 3 times great, because he was considered king, legislator, and priest. He typifies a period when priesthood, magistrate, and royalty were united in a single governing body. Manetho's Egyptian chronology calls this period the reign of the gods. And magicians had spirits as their assistants. Chimney sweeps and the Green Man. But the mystery religions and the stages of the spiritual path were known at one time all over the world, and Europe had the equivalent of Hermes Thoth in the figure of the Green Man, indicating there may have been a great many initiates who became adepts in Europe. Patterns in comparative religion, Mircea Eliade. The coming of the May is often celebrated not only by a tree or maypole, but also by images in human form, ornamented with leaves and flowers. The Slavs of Corinthia, for example, decorate a tree and cover a young man who is known as Green George in green branches on St. George's Day. In England on May Day, Jack in the Green, a chimney sweep covered with leaves and ivy, used to dance at the head of a whole group of sweeps. Smoke is symbolic of thoughts, and thoughts travel up symbolic chimneys. Thus, to purify one's mind, one figuratively cleans one's chimney. And the person who did this was a chimney sweep. Thus the festivals that Mircea Eliade describes are remnants of a time when initiates who had swept their symbolic chimneys clean and reached the end of the spiritual path were celebrated with green wreaths and branches in celebration of the fact they had become adepts of the mysteries. See also the Twin Horns video. The green lion consumes the sun. And so via this path we are able to explain an alchemical picture that has puzzled many for centuries. The green lion consumes the sun. The lion has both a positive and a negative side. See our video on the lion. Potentially the lion is the raw material of a king, but the sun, the ego, the big I am, the roaring intellect, has to be consumed and tamed before the lion can become a king. Evelyn Underhill. Here the common opinion that a pious effeminacy, a diluted and amiable spirituality, is the proper raw material of the mystic life is emphatically contradicted. It is not by the education of the lamb, but by the hunting and taming of the wild, intractable lion. Instinct with vitality, full of ardour and courage, exhibiting heroic qualities, that the great work is achieved. The green lion, then, in his strength and wholeness, is the only creature potentially able to attain perfection. It needs the adoption and purification of man's nature, not merely the encouragement of his transcendental tastes, if he is to achieve the great work. The kingdom of heaven is taken by violence, not by amiable aspiration. In other words, the raw stuff of indomitable human nature is the means by which man is to attain union with the Absolute, the lion, the whole man. Humanity in its strength is, as it were, slain to the world and then resuscitated, but in a very different shape. By its passage through this mystic death, its taming completed, it receives wings. Lavender's blue, dilly dilly, lavender's green. When you are king, dilly dilly, I shall be queen.